You have Mr. Musk, wealthiest guy on earth, running all over Washington, D.C. He is cutting the staff at the Social Security Administration big time. And let me tell you exactly what that means. People who are old and with disabilities die when they can't get the benefits they are entitled to. That's a fact.
One of the most dangerous places that the Doge Bros have been mucking around is at the Social Security Administration. It's been no secret Elon Musk is looking to take a chainsaw to a program he has called a Ponzi scheme. And already we've heard some rumblings from regional offices about seniors panicking about their benefits, and then website outages and staffing cuts and office closures. Well, Alex Wagner went to the source for the new episode of her podcast, Trumpland. Alex interviewed several current Social Security Administration workers about what exactly is happening there. One worker asked to remain anonymous out of fear of reprisals.
It's been chaos. At first, we thought we were all okay. Everybody was, they're messing with these other agencies, so security's good. And then from there, it just escalated. We were fine before. Now they're gutting our back end support. It's really terrifying. It is complete confusion. They're changing the rules. They give us 1 day to learn it, and then people come in and are like, hey, this is the new policy, and we're still trying to figure out what the policy even was. We got 1 day of training. And then they'll say, hey, you know what? We're changing that policy, and then they'll give us a training video and say, hey, you got to watch that video, and then you can't get into the training video because they're like, hey, we're going to do another training video because we're changing a policy again. Somebody needs to do a complete stop and a complete 360 before it's too late.
Alex Wagner is with me now, MSNBC senior political analyst, host of the Trumpland podcast. This new episode drops tomorrow night. Alex, after you did this interview, you sent me a text that was like, hair on fire, like, It is so bad over there. What did you learn?
When you hear someone who's still inside the administration say, it's complete chaos, it's terrifying, this needs to stop now. I mean, I think that there's this sense of alarm around Social Security, but nobody truly understands the level of panic and dysfunction that's happening on the inside. And it represents a new frontier in terms of the conservative war against Social Security, right, Chris? I mean, this is something, Republicans have been trying to dismantle Social Security since its inception, right? George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, famously did a road tour trying to sell the public on privatization in the 80s, and it resulted in higher public support for Social Security. Right. And basically the point we've gotten to is if you can't make a public argument against Social Security, destroy it from the inside, which is exactly what's happening right now. You hear about the dysfunction, the concentrated and organized dysfunction that is set upon the administration because they're firing people en masse, getting rid of the back end. But they're also weaponizing parts of the administration. There's something called the Death Master File, which just by name is terrifying sounding, but that's where...
We're going to all end up on it someday.
Well, we are. The Death Master File comes for all of us. But it also comes for people who aren't yet dead. And Doge and the Trump administration have begun weaponizing the Death Master File and deeming living people dead.
What do you mean?
That is a designation to be put on the Death Master File means you no longer get your Social Security benefits, your credit score goes to zero. You can't get your bank account funds. Your life as you know it is over. They have weaponized it.
It's like a China social credit thing.
Yes.
Where your digital imprint has been vaporized by this one button that some Doge backpack boy
Exactly.
hit.
They have weaponized it. Immigrants, they've also used it against everyday Americans, whether purposefully or inadvertently through their disorganization. This is that same Social Security Administration worker explaining to me what it means to be on that list. And now, because of the dearth of resources, how difficult it is to get off of it. Take a listen.
I've been involved in resurrection cases before where you bring somebody back to life pretty much because they were killed off in our systems. It stops their life. It stops their credit. It stops their bank accounts. It stops their health insurance. If those people are indeed alive, it is going to end their lives as they know it, right? So then you're going to have all of these people, if they exist, are going to come rushing into our office, and our offices already, our seats are full. So you're just going to stand there until we could see you because there's not enough of us and they're still trying to get rid of us. There's nothing efficient about this.
I talked to another person for the podcast who had been deemed dead, who's very much alive, and spent hours, weeks of his life trying to get this, trying to have the federal government recognize the fact that he is alive. He still hasn't gotten his Social Security payments.
Really?
Really? I mean, this.
So he just got unalived by someone.
Probably it happened in February. He believes it was under the Trump administration, and he has been trying. He's talked face-to-face with certain employees. He's obviously very much a live person and not a corpse. His credit score went to 0. He couldn't access his health care. He now has access to health care again, but he still isn't sure whether he's going to get his Social Security payments. He was supposed to get them today, hasn't gotten them.
One of the things that all the people who sort of work in these bureaucracies, and particularly on the IT side, have been saying about the sort of Doge folks is, hold on a second, calm down a little bit. You don't quite know what you're mucking with. And we've seen this at many places. This is the highest stakes mucking with, I think it's fair to say.
73 million Americans are on Social Security. 40% of them, for 40% of them, it is their sole income. You are toying with people's existence. It's not just that income, it's Medicaid, Medicare, it's health insurance, it's their credit score. It's, as he says, their life as they know it is over.
Part of why, so one of my understandings of this, and again, I've followed this, but obviously not as closely as you have in this reporting. I remember one of my first summer jobs when I was working in a bakery with a bunch of folks who were undocumented. They all had Social Security.
Yes.
Right? And, what that allows you to do is you can work, and it's sort of a win-win for the American government because they pay Social Security taxes with no expectation they're ever going to get the benefits.
Exactly.
Right? Billions of dollars come in from folks. That seems to be one of the things they want to target, right? That's one of the things is weaponize it against undocumented folks who are, let's be clear, paying into Social Security even though they have no...
They're never going to access it.
They're never going to access it.
They are not going to access it. But it's also, the dysfunction is affecting, first of all, that in and of itself is wanton and cruel. Then there's just the dysfunction that's led to certain Doge bros deeming alive Americans to be dead Americans. And then there's the more nefarious reality that's playing out in the court system, which is that Doge is trying to access the private data of Americans in the Social Security system and has been told by a federal judge, you cannot do that. Doge has done it anyway. You started this show talking about the impunity, the lawlessness of the Trump administration when it comes to deportations. It extends to Social Security. It extends to the social safety net, weaponizing it against Americans, cutting them off the rolls, and trying to destroy their lives either through ineptitude or because of a political agenda.
One of the things, Musk has not been shy about this. He has been saying completely, I think, fair to say, falsely or charitably with no evidence, that there's like tens of millions of people that are getting fraudulent checks. And that the idea here is that, they're not going to cut Social Security, they're just going to cut off all these fraudulent people, and that's the game plan.
Yes, and I think what we can't underestimate is the degree, there are the people on the outside that are suffering, but there are also people in this administration, one of whom told me, we are in free fall. We are in free fall. These are the people that are charged with keeping the social safety net intact. This is our reality. Alex
Wagner, you can learn more of that incredible reporting. The new episode of Trumpland drops tomorrow night. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, buddy.
That is all in on this Wednesday night. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Alex.
Or Rachel.
Good evening,
Rachel.
Alex.
Rachel.
He's so used to it. He's just so used to it, Rachel.
But I want to say good evening to all of us, really, each and every one.
Okay.
We're all in this together, Chris. Don't worry. And you know what? Frankly, we're all sort of intercentral. Ask any of our critics.
That's true, actually.
Not really,
that was one of the
singular.
more infelicitous screw-ups we've had. Let's get a little audit on that when we get off air.
I love it. I'm feeling honored. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Thank you. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Really happy to have you here. So, Michigan State University is in beautiful East Lansing, Michigan. It's a really big school, more than 40,000 undergrads enrolled at any one time, another 7,000 or so people enrolled as graduate students. And Michigan State is a really big-name school. It gets a lot of national attention, in particular for its sports teams. The most high-profile college sports are obviously football and basketball. Michigan State almost always has really great teams in both football and basketball. I've also got a pretty good hockey program. Because Michigan State is a Division I school and because they are very, very good at the sports that get on TV, And most especially because they're part of the Big Ten, which is a big, highly televised, lots of attention athletic conference in this country. Whether or not you got any connection to Michigan, people all over this country know Michigan State and the Michigan State Spartans. Well, last night, the Faculty Senate at Michigan State voted that their school should join the other schools in the Big Ten in a totally non-sports related agreement. The faculty at Michigan State voted last night that their school should join with all the other schools in the Big Ten in what they're calling a mutual defense compact, a mutual academic defense compact. And what that means is kind of what it says. When Trump inevitably comes after one of the schools in the Big Ten, be it Michigan State or Rutgers or Ohio State or UCLA or USC or University of Washington or any of the other schools in that conference, the idea is that all the other schools would agree to help that school defend itself and fight back, which would mean lawyers and experts and advocacy and lobbying and public relations. They would all do it together. They would treat Trump attacking any one of those schools as an attack on all of those schools. So no matter which one Trump picks first to go after, no school would have to fight alone. Michigan State's faculty voted last night for their school to join and help create such a compact. And they are not the first, they are just the latest. They join Rutgers in New Jersey and the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and Indiana University at Bloomington. Also outside the Big Ten, the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. All those schools have taken the same or similar steps thus far. According to the Chronicle of Higher Education and our own reporting, we are expecting votes along these lines soon at the Ohio State University and the University of Michigan and the University of Washington. We believe a vote like that is under discussion already at the University of Minnesota and at Penn State. We've also had faculty at Northwestern and the University of Oregon already pass similar but sort of more mild statements saying that they are generally in favor of this kind of idea. But, you know, a statement is just a statement. All that and $1 will buy you a scratch ticket. And frankly, time is short. But I'm telling you, this is a movement that is nevertheless picking up steam. Today, we've got grad student unions at a whole bunch of universities asking for their schools to join in a mutual academic defense compact like this as well. Grad students at the University of Minnesota, which I just mentioned, again, may have a faculty vote on this matter soon. Also, grad students at Cornell University and Stanford, the University of Chicago, Northwestern, University of New Mexico, New Mexico State, North Carolina State, Johns Hopkins, MIT, Dartmouth, University of Iowa, grad students in all of those places speaking out, asking their universities to form a mutual defense compact with other schools. Tomorrow, this is one to watch for in Wisconsin. In Madison, we're expecting a big rally at the University of Wisconsin at Madison to demand that that school join such a compact as well. So this is something that is really picking up steam, but it ought to. Vice President J.D. Vance gave a keynote speech to a national conservatism conference a couple of years ago, and the title of his speech was literally, "The Universities Are the Enemy."
Ladies and gentlemen, the universities do not pursue knowledge and truth. They pursue deceit and lies, and it's time to be honest about that fact.
The title of the speech was literally, "The Universities Are the Enemy." He ended the speech with a quote from Richard Nixon, "Professors are the enemy." And he didn't mean it ironically. They're really not kidding about this stuff. Part of their mission is to use their power in the U.S. government to destroy American higher education, to destroy U.S. colleges and universities, not because of any particular thing that colleges and universities are doing, but just because they think they're bad and they shouldn't exist, and they are going to try to destroy them. They have been saying this for years. Now it is clear we should believe them. Tonight, CNN and the Washington Post are reporting that President Trump has directed the IRS to strip tax-exempt status from Harvard University after Harvard said this week that it would not accede to Trump's threats. It would not enter into some kind of receivership where Donald Trump gets to dictate the school's internal policies and academic decisions. Now, there are, of course, laws about tax-exempt status. The IRS can't legally take it away from a university or from any entity just because Trump pounds his chest and says so. So we'll be talking about that more on tonight's show. But the fact that Trump is trying it tells you, tells anybody paying attention that, yeah, now's the time, move fast, right? Any school that wants to survive what Trump and Vance are doing here, what their agenda is here for American universities and colleges, any school that wants to survive what's coming their way better find a way to not have to fight alone. And so, yes, now we are seeing all kinds of colleges all across the country move toward mutual defense pacts with other schools. Basically, little NATO treaties for all the colleges. An attack on one is an attack on all. I will tell you, I have no connection to any of these efforts, but I would just say as an observer, just speaking strategically, my only note on this might be go faster. Once he's targeted you, it's too late to have a mutual defense treaty in position. You have to have these things in place ahead of time before he signs that executive order or yanks your funding or does whatever he's going to do to you. Time is short. River rises. So we're going to stay on this. We're going to keep you posted. While we are on this subject, though, may I also introduce you to the Federal Workers Legal Defense Network. This is brand new. More than 1,000 lawyers in 42 states have completed training now to defend federal workers from all aspects of what Trump is doing to them in the federal government. Not just in lawsuits to challenge Trump's mass, indiscriminate, and in some cases illegal firings of huge swaths of people who work for the U.S. government, but also training on how to provide individual guidance and legal support to individual federal workers who have been fired or otherwise mistreated by the Trump administration. This was convened by civil rights groups, including the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and advocacy groups like Democracy Forward. You keep hearing their name in the news because they've been suing the bejesus out of Trump in this second term. It was also pulled together by unions, including especially the AFL-CIO. They have all now come together to put together this very large 1,000-plus lawyer effort in 42 states, this Federal Workers Legal Defense Network. And they say their lawyers are trained and it is now up and running. And again, I would just say, speed matters. In an attempted authoritarian takeover that is trying to go as far as it can, as fast as it can, before the country can properly organize its defenses, speed matters. That said, even if it hasn't been done already, still do it, right? Even if the best time to have done something like this Federal Workers Legal Defense Network was probably yesterday or a month ago, the second best time to do it is right now. And so, yes, as of today, we've got one. And that means that federal workers are better off today than they were before. In terms of the country standing up its defenses against the authoritarian takeover, the Washington Post tonight was first to report on Trump's plans for what he's going to do to health care. And these plans are draconian enough that I can't help but think that they may have an impact on how many Americans think they've got some skin in the game in terms of whether or not they want to participate in a protest or otherwise take part in some sort of civic activity to say no, to show their dissent, to register their disapproval of what Trump is doing. Because what the Washington Post is reporting on Trump's plans for health care, this is Trump's plans for health care after the 10,000 people that he just fired from HHS. On top of those 10,000 people fired from HHS, Trump's new plan is reportedly to cut another $40 billion from U.S. healthcare and health research. That's fully a third of what the United States spends on healthcare and research. Trump wants to cut all of the CDC's work, for example, on heart disease and obesity and diabetes and smoking and HIV. You think that might galvanize people in this country? Trump is not saying he wants to trim these programs or make them more efficient. The plan, according to this document published by the Washington Post, the plan is to eliminate the CDC's work on heart disease, obesity, diabetes, smoking, HIV. Yeah, because it's not like any of us know anybody who has any one of those issues, right? No one within the sound of my voice right now has any connection to anyone with heart disease, right? Have you ever even heard of that? Heart disease? Does that sound like a foreign concept? I mean, Americans will sure be glad that Donald Trump forced the United States of America to stop working on heart disease altogether because, yeah, none of us have ever heard of anybody having a heart attack, right? None of us have anybody in our families or anybody we're connected to who's got problems with cholesterol or high blood pressure, right? That's really exotic stuff, right? Yeah, obesity. Americans have no idea what that is. We've got no personal connection to that. Thank God Donald Trump is going to save us from the waste of the U.S. government working on those woke liberal problems, like diabetes. This was Missoula, Montana today. In deep red state Montana, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders turning out more than 9,000 people today. Look at this. Look at that crowd. Middle of the day on a Wednesday in Montana. Yesterday in California, AOC and Bernie turned out over 10,000 people in Bakersfield, California, and 26,000 people in Folsom, California. This is not like San Francisco or Oakland or Berkeley. This is not a liberal enclave in California. And they turned out 26,000 people in Folsom.
You know, I heard that someone started flying a plane with a banner that said, this is Trump country. It sure don't look like it today. I don't think this is Trump country. I think this is our country.
That was Folsom, California, in a Republican congressional district yesterday. This was the day before that, Monday, in Ruby Red, Idaho, a sold-out capacity crowd of 12,500 people. Look at this. In Nampa, Idaho. This was the day before that in Ruby Red, Utah. 20,000 people turning out to see Bernie and AOC in Salt Lake City. This was the day before that in Los Angeles. Senator Bernie Sanders, his office saying that this crowd that turned out in, drop the chyron there so people can see the crowd. Thank you. Senator Bernie Sanders' office saying this crowd of 36,000 people that turned out to see him and AOC in Los Angeles on Saturday was the biggest crowd that Senator Bernie Sanders has ever spoken to anywhere. These are just massive, massive, massive events that the two of them have been holding in California, but not in the, not necessarily in the blue state caricature parts of California. And also in Utah and Idaho and Montana. And these crowds are out there for two of the most dynamic and most unapologetic fighting progressives in all of U.S. electoral politics. The Fight Oligarchy Tour. Senator Sanders' office says of the people who've been RSVPing for these events, yes, most of them are Democrats, but they say 21% of people turning out for these events are independents, and they say 8% of people turning out for these rallies are Republicans. And 8%, I know, 8% sounds like single digits, but 8% when you're talking about like 200,000 people they've spoken to at these events thus far, that's saying something. And huge events like these that are being done by Senator Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, huge events like these are definitely saying something about how the country feels about this political moment and about Donald Trump. And I will say, just in terms of the media, the sheer size of these events and the fact that most of them are in red states means that they're starting to get a ton of press and a ton of attention from the mainstream media. And that, of course, is starting to rattle everyone in politics on all sides, which is always fun to see. But I'll tell you, you know, seeing those big events and seeing all the press they're now getting is fantastic to watch. But look around, because when it's not an event with thousands of people, which obviously is going to get a lot of attention, what we're still seeing is thousands of events, thousands of protests, protests that are happening every day and in every state. I mean, here's just a snapshot. Yesterday, protests to save Social Security from what Trump is doing to it at the Social Security field office here in Peekskill, New York, and at the Social Security office in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and in East Vancouver, Washington, people, again, protesting to protect Social Security. In Baltimore, Maryland, people protesting against Trump letting his top campaign donor, Elon Musk, access everyone's personal data at the Social Security Administration. This was outside the Social Security headquarters in Washington, D.C. yesterday. You see the sign there. Elon has your SSN. Elon has your Social Security number. Protests in Atlanta against Trump's mass firings at the CDC. These protesters in Atlanta joined by Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson. In Kansas City, Missouri, people turning out protesting against Trump's mass firings at the IRS. In San Francisco, protests against Trump turning the IRS into a weapon to be used against immigrants. At Florida International University in Miami, protests against Trump's attacks on immigrants and on international students. No ICE on campus. At the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, a protest against students' visas being revoked. More protests against Trump's attacks on immigrants and international students at Emory University in Georgia. In Burlington, Vermont, a protest outside the detention hearing for Rumeysa Ozturk. She's the Tufts University doctoral student, the Fulbright scholar, who was snatched off the street and taken to a prison in Louisiana by masked Trump agents who didn't show their names and didn't show their faces, put her in an unmarked car. Yesterday, also in Louisiana, a protest outside that immigration prison, which is holding Rumeysa Ozturk, and also holding Mahmoud Khalil from Columbia University, and frankly, thousands of other people whose names we do not know. People protested at the Tesla dealership in Chicago yesterday, including these kind of cute signs that are shaped like Cybertrucks. I've never thought Cybertrucks were cute, but the signs shaped like Cybertrucks are cute. People protested at an announcement by the Indiana governor, Mike Braun, when he announced yesterday that he's going to try to do to health care in Indiana what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing to national health care for Trump. Oh, boy. Indiana residents turned out at the state capitol to tell Governor Mike Braun what to do with that idea. Signs saying things like, Governor Braun, why ask a lawyer for medical advice? And hands off our vaccines. And simply, clown show. The resounding no that you are hearing, or the resounding clown show raspberries, or the resounding ovation for the this doesn't look like Trump country, this looks like our country comment from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, what I just showed you is just a snapshot of a day. But that kind of resistance, that kind of saying no, that kind of rejection of what Trump is doing and are willing to protest it and say no to it. It's taking every different form, right? I mean, the pro bono legal defense network for federal workers, more than 1,000 lawyers joining that to work pro bono for federal workers. The mutual academic defense agreements for colleges. The big rallies, the small handful of brave protesters making sure dissent is visible at local congressmen's offices, local Social Security offices, local IRS offices. We also saw it yesterday in something I've never really seen before, a very unusual show of support for judges and for the judiciary. A small group, including a sitting judge and a retired judge, and a number of legal academics, legal professionals, asked people to convene online yesterday to show support for judges and their families and stand up in a nonpartisan way against threats to judges and their families. Among the judges who participated in this was Judge Astor Salas, whose husband was grievously wounded and whose son was murdered in New Jersey. I first heard about this. I thought, one, this is a very unusual thing. You don't hear about the judiciary asking people to stand up for them very often. And two, because the threats that judges and their families have received right now are so terrible, I thought, even though this is a very unusual thing that they're asking people to do, I thought, you know what, I bet they are going to get a pretty good response to this. I bet they're going to get, like 200 or 300 people to show up online in this Speak Up for Justice event. I thought they'd get, I thought they'd get a couple hundred people. I thought they might get like 500 people. They got more than 7,000 people joining that event in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. So the ways people are standing up and saying no, and standing up and saying they reject this, and standing up and giving the administration the one-finger salute, to put it in blunt terms, they are innumerable and unpredictable. And they surprise me every day that we cover this stuff. But today we saw something from a U.S. senator that we never thought any U.S. senator would ever have to do. And so add this to the pantheon of things that people are doing to stand up to this administration and to try to stop some of the worst that they are trying to do. As one federal judge started contempt proceedings against the Trump administration, and a second judge threatened them over the Trump administration refusing to comply with court orders, insisting that there's no law that can constrain Donald Trump from sending people from this country to a foreign prison indefinitely with no legal process at all. Today, a U.S. Senator, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democratic senator from Maryland, he himself flew alone to El Salvador to try to get back one of his constituents, to try to get back a Maryland resident who Donald Trump sent to that foreign prison in El Salvador, even when the Trump administration admitted that trying to deport him in the way they did had been an administrative error. Residents of Maryland have been protesting every day at the courthouse as a federal judge in Maryland has been ordering the Trump administration that they really do need to go get him and return him. Senator Van Hollen says he promised Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife and his mother that he would do everything in his power as a senator to get Mr. Abrego Garcia back. Well, today, the senator went to El Salvador himself to try to get him. And Senator Chris Van Hollen joins us live from El Salvador. Next. As by mistake, is one of the largest maximum security prisons in Latin America. In recent weeks, that prison has become a kind of photo op for members of the Trump administration and his Republican supporters in the U.S. Congress. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem toured the prison in March, posting an Abu Ghraib-style video and photos of herself in front of a crowded cell. This week, Republican Congressman Jason Smith of Missouri posted his own photo from inside the prison in El Salvador. So did Republican Congressman Riley Moore of West Virginia, who shared this photo, double thumbs up, in front of the cells of the prison. Today, another lawmaker arrived in El Salvador, this time a Democrat, and he's there for a very different reason. He is the senior senator from the state where Kilmar Abrego Garcia lived with his family until the Trump administration had him arrested and took him to this foreign prison in a move the administration, again, admitted was what they called an administrative error. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland landed in El Salvador today with the hope that he might see Mr. Abrego Garcia or be able to talk to him.
I hope to meet with some high-level government officials from El Salvador. As I've said before, the goal of my visit is to talk to people here about the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I told his wife and his family I would do everything possible to bring him home, and we're going to keep working at this until we're successful. I also hope to have the chance to meet with him, but we'll have a better idea if that works out a little later on.
Senator Van Hollen landing in El Salvador today, hoping for a chance to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia in that prison. Senator Van Hollen says the vice president of El Salvador told him he would not be able to do that when he met with him today. Joining us now for the interview is Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who joins us from El Salvador. Senator, thank you so much for what you're doing and for being here with us tonight. I know it's been a very long day.
It has, Rachel, but as you said in the intro, I promised Kilmar's family that I would do everything I could to bring him home because, as you said, a court in the United States has determined that he was illegally abducted from the United States and landed in the most notorious prison in El Salvador. So that's why I raised these issues directly with the vice president of El Salvador. The president is not in the country now, so I met with the vice president to talk about these issues and ask for the opportunity to go visit Kilmar.
What are what's sort of the range of potential outcomes here that you think are possible? What are you hoping to accomplish on this trip? And how did those expectations match up with the experience that you had today meeting with the country's vice president and hearing what you did from him?
Well, my goal is to keep a spotlight on this issue until justice is done, until the 9-0 opinion by the Supreme Court is implemented by the Trump administration, which is ignoring entirely that order that they need to facilitate his return. I asked the folks at the embassy whether they'd been ordered by the administration to do anything to facilitate his return. The answer was no, so they're clearly not in compliance. And I said to the vice president of El Salvador, look, you've got somebody in your worst prison, the prison for terrorists, who the United States court has said has committed no crime. And so I asked him if he had any evidence that Kilmar was a member of MS-13 or had committed any crimes. And he said, no. So I asked him why he was keeping Kilmar in prison here. And his answer was that essentially the Trump administration is paying the government of El Salvador taxpayer money to keep this person here despite the court orders. So my goal, Rachel, is to make sure that we keep the spotlight on this issue because I think it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable to continue to keep a person who has not been convicted of a crime in the worst prison in El Salvador when the Trump administration admitted itself to a judge that this was a mistake. But instead of fixing the mistake, they fired the Justice Department lawyer who admitted it was a mistake.
I just want to underscore what you just said there, that you were told by the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador that they have received no request from the White House or from the Justice Department, from any other entity in Washington, asking them to take any steps to obtain the release of Mr. Abrego Garcia. Presumably, it's the local U.S. officials at the embassy there who would be the relevant point of contact, the first point of contact for the U.S. government trying to attain that outcome, correct?
Well, that's exactly right. And it is pretty clear that the Trump administration has not lifted a finger to implement that court order. And so I think it's important that the courts know that, and they will know that. And again, denying his family an opportunity to even have a phone call with Kilmar is just a gross violation of basic human rights and human decency. And I asked the vice president if I came back next week, whether or not I could go visit Kilmar. And the answer was no, he couldn't guarantee that. I said, look, I may be the first member of Congress here, the first senator, but I can assure you more will be coming. And you cannot continue to keep this man locked up in this worst prison in El Salvador, and one of the worst in the hemisphere, when he hasn't committed a crime. And so we're going to keep at this. And I asked the vice president just to let him out the gate, because you may remember at the White House, the president of El Salvador said, well, we can't smuggle Kilmar back into the United States. He said, you don't have to smuggle him back to the United States. We know you can't do that. Just open the prison door. And Attorney General Pam Bondi said the United States would send a plane down here. And if she doesn't, at least he would be free for now in El Salvador as we work to find a way to get him back into the court system and due process in the United States. Again, nothing.
You mentioned that other...
So...
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I think this is, of course, about the family and making sure the family gets justice. But it's also, as you say, about the Trump administration trying to deprive individuals in the United States of their liberty without any due process, right? This is like taking away people's freedom. That does not sound like a conservative idea to me. That is something that, of course, authoritarian governments engage in, and it's a very fast road to tyranny if we don't all stand up against it.
You mentioned the possibility, and now it seems like the likelihood that other members of Congress are going to make their way to El Salvador. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey has expressed interest in going. Congressman Maxwell Frost, the young congressman from Florida, has formally requested a congressional delegation, a CODEL, to El Salvador. Given that a couple of Republican members of Congress who are supporters of what Trump has done using this prison have somehow gotten into the prison and been able to take photo ops there, given that the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, was able to get in and do a photo op there. I wonder what you make of the El Salvadoran government sort of opening the door to allow Trump administration officials and Republican supporters of President Trump in there to make essentially social media content while still denying you the opportunity to get inside.
Well, you're right. That's clearly what's happening. I mean, you have the government of El Salvador, the president of El Salvador, make this deal with the Trump administration. I think it's $15 million that the Trump administration is going to be paying El Salvador to essentially take these folks from the United States who have been denied due process in the case of Kilmar. And again, Republicans seem to be happy to take photo ops at this site and celebrate the fact that the President of the United States is ignoring court orders and that the government of El Salvador is keeping this guy locked up who's committed no crime at all. So I do think, though, as we continue to put the spotlight on this injustice, that they ultimately will have to let him go. I believe that will be the case because I believe people will keep pressing for justice.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen joining us live tonight from El Salvador. Sir, thank you again for making time to be here and helping us understand this and explain it to our audience. Please keep us apprised. I know a lot of people are worried about you being there, given what's going on between our government and the government of El Salvador and the kind of language used by their president in talking about this standoff. So please be safe, keep us apprised, and we'll look forward to having you back on soon.
Will do. Thank you, Rachel.
All right, more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us. Oath to uphold it. To permit such officials to freely annul the judgments of the courts of the United States would not just destroy the rights acquired under those judgments, it would make a solemn mockery of the Constitution itself. Defendants provide no convincing reason to avoid the conclusion that appears obvious. They deliberately flouted this court's order. Rather than offer a mea culpa and attempt to explain this grave error and detail plans to rectify it, defendants offer various imaginative arguments for why they nevertheless technically complied with the order. None of their positions withstand scrutiny. Defendants' conduct, moreover, manifests a willful disregard of the court's legally binding prescriptions. Given the evidence at this early stage in the inquiry and offered no persuasive reason to conclude otherwise, the court finds that there is probable cause that defendants acted contemptuously. When the judge says acted contemptuously, he means in a legal sense, as in the defendants acted in contempt of court. If you want to know where contempt of court is on the map of the death of the Republic, it's that thing right on the edge of the abyss. You get up to you're approaching the cliff, there's the signs telling you you're getting close to the edge, and then you go past the signs, and then you get right up to the edge. It's the contempt of court that's right there. When the Trump administration started shipping people off to a foreign prison in El Salvador, a judge in Washington ordered them to turn around the planes that were in the air at that moment flying to that prison. The administration did not do that. Instead, they sent those people that he is done playing games. They are on the edge of contempt, which is on the edge of the end. He gave the Trump administration until Wednesday, next week, 1 week, to either fix this mess by having the U.S. government retake custody of all those people it shipped to El Salvador, or start handing over the names of Trump officials for the judge to hold in criminal contempt. We are getting to it here. We're going to talk to the lead attorney who is suing the government in this case next. Stay with us.
written. Since 1971, the Southern Poverty Law Center has been fighting hate and defending justice and equality in the U.S. But we can't do it without support from people like you. Please call now or go online to helpfighthate.org to become a friend of the center. For just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day, you can support the fight for justice. In recent years, hate crimes against Black, Jewish, and LGBTQ Americans have nearly doubled across the U.S. This violence has no place in a just society.
Hate and extremism are dividing us like never before. But together, we can protect our communities and continue providing no-cost legal help to those impacted by hate violence.
So please call or go to helpfighthate.org and give just $19 a month. When you use your credit card, you'll receive this special Fight Hate t-shirt to show you're standing up for civil rights. The fate of our country is in our hands. We can and will build a more just future, but it won't come without a fight. That's why we need your support today.
Southern Poverty Law Center staff are in the courts defending freedom and in the halls of power advocating for change and working hard to prevent recruitment into extremist groups throughout the United States. Together, we can push back against this wave of hate and extremism.
Become a friend of the center today. Call or go online to helpfighthate.org right now.
Stanley Steamer is proud to be the leader in deep cleaning, cleaning over 1 million homes and businesses every year using powerful equipment custom built by us. It's not clean until it's
Last month, the Trump administration appeared to defy a court order when a judge ordered them to turn around planes that were taking people from the United States to a prison in El Salvador. After the planes didn't turn around and landed in El Salvador, the president of that country mocked the judge's order by tweeting, quote, "Oopsie, too late." He literally used the word oopsie. That was then reposted by America's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Well, today, the judge in that case wrote that there's probable cause for contempt charges against Trump administration officials. He cited that instance specifically. Quote, "Boasts by defendants intimated that they had defied the court's order deliberately and gleefully. The Secretary of State, for instance, retweeted a post in which, above a news headline noting this court's order to return the flights to the U.S., the president of El Salvador wrote, 'Oopsie, too late.'" Life comes at you fast, Marco Rubio. Joining us now is Lee Gallant, Deputy Director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project and the lead attorney in this case against the administration. Mr. Gallant, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.
This is one of those rulings from a federal judge that gets read on nightly news shows because it is narrative and it is written in a way that is designed to make clear to all people, not just lawyers, how serious the stakes are here and how badly, in this judge's estimation, the administration has messed up on something very serious. What's your reaction to this ruling and what do you think it will mean for this case?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, first of all, your introduction, I think, hit it right. This is serious business, and we're in a very serious place. And I think you're right about the way the judge wrote it. I think he's writing for more than just the lawyers, more than just law professors. He's trying to talk to the American public about what it would mean if court orders are violated. And I think the other thing he said, which is really important, is because I've been sitting there in court, obviously, for all these hearings, is he has given the government time and time again the opportunity to explain themselves, and they've simply refused. The most important thing from our standpoint is I'm going to let other people get into whether we're at a constitutional crisis now or approaching it and what it means for the rule of law in a larger sense. The most important thing for me today was that the court said, look, they can still get out from under this if they do the right thing and bring these men back. And obviously everyone's focused on Kilmer right now, and that's critically important that he be brought back. But in our case, there were hundreds of Venezuelan men who were wrongfully sent to this prison and are there now. And I think Judge Boasberg's saying, look, as bad as this was, I don't need to go through with all this if you just do the right thing and bring these men back. Unfortunately, the government has already appealed his order. His order came out this afternoon. They've already appealed it rather than saying, okay, we'll do the right thing and bring these men back.
And to be clearly, what the judge is signaling here is that the Trump administration does not need to set all of these people free or release them or do any other specific thing. The judge is simply saying that these men must be brought back into the custody of the United States, that they must be under the control and custody of the United States so that the proceedings on any number of their cases can proceed along the lines that are afforded under the Constitution, right? He's not telling the administration that they need to do any one thing with any of these men other than put them back under U.S. control.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Rachel. That's absolutely right. The judge has gone out of his way to make clear that he is not ordering these men to be released on U.S. streets. If they've committed crimes, they could be prosecuted, they can be detained under our immigration laws, and they can be removed under our immigration laws. But they can't be sent to a foreign prison, potentially for the rest of their lives, without due process. What he is saying is bring them back to the U.S., give them due process, and if ultimately they're deported under the immigration laws, then they're deported under the immigration laws. But he is not by any means saying they should be free to be out of detention until they have due process and can prove that they're not gang members. But that's exactly right. I mean, there's a false choice going on here where we either send them to this brutal Salvadoran prison for the rest of their lives, or we let them out on U.S. streets. That's not what's going on. He's simply saying you cannot use a wartime authority without any due process. And he's been 100% clear about it. The government knows that. And what he has said to the government point blank in court is, look, if anybody in the administration is going out there saying, I'm letting these people out on the street, they need to stop doing it. He's, I think, really upset that people are mischaracterizing what he's doing.
Do you expect, I guess the way to ask this is, do you expect a predictable outcome if this case does result in Trump administration officials being held in contempt? I feel like that is something that is very rare in U.S. history. It's certainly very rare on a matter like this, where the government has been given lots and lots and lots of opportunity to remedy its compliance with the court's orders. Is there anything that we should sort of be preparing ourselves for if contempt proceedings do proceed here?
You know, if the government is they're going to take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court again. And how the court rules, I don't know. But I don't see the government saying, sure, we'll bring the people back, we'll do the right thing, or sure, we'll take the stand and tell you the truth. I wish one of those two things would happen. But right now, based on what I've seen the last few months, I don't see the Trump administration doing it. So I would say, in answer to your question, the only thing that's predictable is they will keep fighting. They've already appealed to the circuit, and I suspect they'll go to the Supreme Court. And that's unfortunate that they're going to, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if they do go to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court tells them to bring these guys back, they're going to bring these guys back. They are, because they have to, because there's no other choice. There's no choose your own adventure in our country where an order like that from the Supreme Court is defied. It just doesn't. They may hem and haw, but it's just not going to happen. We're not going to be there. Lee Gillard, Deputy Director for the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, the lead lawyer in this case against the Trump administration. Lee, I know it's been a long and very intense day. Thanks for your help tonight.
Thanks, Rachel.
We'll be right back. For me tonight. I will see you again tomorrow and every night this week at 9 p.m. Eastern. But now it is time for the last word with the great Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Rachel, I have to tell you, there's so many memorable moments and interviews I've had watching your hour of television tonight. Senator Van Hollen from El Salvador is one of the real high points. It was just an amazing situation to be in, that he's there, the reason he's there. And your interview with him was absolutely riveting from start to finish.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I feel really lucky that we were able to get him. I mean, it's very affecting to me to see him standing alone. There's all these members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress and senators who said, we'll go with you. You know, like, let's go as a phalanx. And he just said, he went down there on his own, senior senator from Maryland, and said, this guy's my constituent. I told his mother and I told his wife that I would try to get him out. I told them I would do everything that I could. This is me trying to do everything that I can. And he'd said in the interview, you know, like he may be back next week and that other members of Congress are going to be there too. And he believes that they are going to get him out. A court order should be all it takes. But in this case, it's going to take all sorts of pressure from all sorts of elected officials and others doing all sorts of things we never thought an American politician would have to do. But Senator Van Hollen just down there kind of humbly doing the work and trying to get that outcome is really a very moving thing for me.
Yeah, it really is. It is literally like nothing we've ever seen before, nothing we ever anticipated we would need to see. But he just did the most important work he could possibly have done on this day as a senator from Maryland.
Yeah, we're used to seeing, you know, individual elected officials or political figures out trying to like negotiate the release of hostages held by other countries. In this case, that guy's being held because of the U.S. government, not because of anybody else. And to have an American representative of the U.S. government, the U.S. Senate, go there essentially to negotiate against our own government, holding an American in a foreign gulag. It's just, I mean, it's amazing that it has to be done, but it's also amazing that he's doing it.
Thank you for delivering that story as fully as you did tonight with Senator Van Hollen. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, with Justice Department lawyers facing the possibility for the first time in history of being found in criminal contempt of court thanks entirely to Donald Trump, the greater tragedy that will be studied for centuries to come wherever American law and American history are taught is that tonight, the United States of America is enduring for the first time in its history the governance of a president who treats any law that he does not like with contempt. Every president other than Donald Trump has taken the oath of office seriously. They all felt the solemnity of their pledge to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Some presidents embodied the principles of that oath more fully than others, but none of them ever came close to the constant contempt for the Constitution that Donald Trump has demonstrated. The only criminal president we had prior to Donald Trump was Republican President Richard Nixon, who in the end followed his oath in fully complying with the most painful order any president has ever received from the United States Supreme Court. Richard Nixon was ordered by the unanimous opinion of the United States Supreme Court to turn over secret tape recordings of his conversations in the Oval Office, which he knew contained incriminating evidence against him that would get him impeached and removed from office and then convicted of federal crimes. Richard Nixon knew better than the lawyers who were pursuing those tapes just how incriminating those tapes would be for Richard Nixon. President Nixon knew better than the members of the Supreme Court just how incriminating those tapes would be for him. Richard Nixon was a sharp enough lawyer to know that if the Supreme Court ordered him to turn over those tapes, and if he turned over those tapes, he would be forced out of the presidency and he would be criminally prosecuted. Nixon knew all of that. And Nixon turned over those tapes 12 days after the Supreme Court ordered him to turn over those tapes. And so as bad as Richard Nixon, the only president who escaped prosecution after serving his term as president by obtaining a pardon from his successor. Richard Nixon had more respect for the due process of law and more respect for the Constitution than Donald Trump. The man who apparently respects nothing has never had anything but contempt for the Constitution, which he has solemnly sworn to protect and defend. What more evidence would anyone need that Donald Trump putting his hand on a Bible and taking an oath means absolutely nothing. All of Donald Trump's wives, including his current wife, soon learned that the words of a marital oath mean nothing to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's current wife was one of the two family members who never set foot in the courtroom in Manhattan last year when Stormy Daniels was testifying under oath about the precise nature of Donald Trump's violations of his marital oath that he is supposed to be living under right now, tonight. The other family member who did not show up in that courtroom is Donald Trump's youngest son, who was at home with his mother when he was 4 months old, and Donald Trump was in a hotel room with Stormy Daniels. You don't have to be highly educated. You don't have to follow the details of government and politics to know what an oath means to Donald Trump. Stormy Daniels could explain it all to you in very simple terms that anyone can understand. Donald Trump's contempt for the Constitution begins at the beginning of the list of amendments called the Bill of Rights. The founders wrote the Constitution, and the states ratified the Constitution and created the United States of America before the Bill of Rights was written. Many of the founders and the first Congress believed that the first order of business of the new government had to be the writing into the original law of the land, the Constitution via the 10 amendments, exactly what the government owed to every citizen, the protections the government owed to everyone in America. Donald Trump doesn't just hate the First Amendment, he has violated it. Donald Trump repeatedly says that news organizations, including this one, that he doesn't like, should be closed down. Richard Nixon, on his worst day, never thought that, never said that. Donald Trump's attempt to take over Harvard University was, from beginning to end, a violation of the First Amendment by the President of the United States of America, unlike anything we have ever seen in the history of the presidency. And now Donald Trump is violating the Constitution's Bill of Rights provisions for due process for anyone he wants to deport. And he has violated those rights to the point that the Trump Justice Department lawyers now face a possibility of being found in criminal contempt of court, which we will discuss in detail later in this program. From the start, for 10 full years now, since Donald Trump, the candidate, first began talking about tariffs, I have been reminding you of what you learned in your high school government class, if you took that course the way I did, about tariffs. The president cannot randomly decide which tariffs to increase or decrease. So says the Constitution. And I learned that from my great teacher and baseball coach in high school, Henry Lane. And then I learned a little more about it while majoring in economics in college and studying, among other things, international trade. And then I learned a lot more about it when I became the chief of staff of the Senate Finance Committee, working for Chairman Daniel Patrick Moynihan on the committee that has jurisdiction over tariffs. When the Senate Finance Committee was created in 1815, tariffs were virtually the only business of the Finance Committee, which also has jurisdiction over taxation, because in the early days of the country, tariffs were the largest source of revenue for the federal government. The income tax was a 20th century creation and instantly became the dominant revenue stream to the federal government. But Congress, the House and the Senate, have complete control of tariffs and taxes given to the Congress directly in the Constitution, the very first law of the land, the first law of the United States of America. In 1977, the Congress passed an obscure law called the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which gave the president some tools, limited tools, to deal directly in an emergency, a temporary emergency, with some international issues, specifically did not give the president the power to touch tariffs in any way. And it is that obscure 1977 law that Donald Trump has been using to justify what I have always insisted are his illegal tariffs. How obscure is the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, created in 1977? When I was the top staff member of the Senate Finance Committee with jurisdiction over tariffs, I did not know that that law existed. There was good reason for that. No president of the United States ever used that law to touch a single tariff, not once. And so I entered the first Trump presidency with the belief that the president did not have the legal power to randomly raise tariffs. But Donald Trump did it. And Donald Trump got away with it. And Republicans in Congress who could have stopped him refused to do so. And I have been waiting and waiting and waiting since that first Trump presidency and his first illegal tariff on washing machines, claiming that imported washing machines created an international emergency. I have been waiting for what finally happened today. I have been waiting for someone with the power and legal authority to go into any federal court anywhere in the United States and put Donald Trump's name on a lawsuit suing him to stop his illegal tariffs. And that happened today in the federal court for the Northern District of California with Donald J. Trump as the principal defendant and the state of California and governor of California as the plaintiffs who have finally brought the case that spells out just how illegal the Trump tariffs are. The suit was filed by California's Attorney General Rob Bonta. And right there in the lawsuit is one of the explanations for why I always believed we would never see a president, even Donald Trump, try to raise and lower tariffs without congressional approval. The lawsuit says, quote, tariffs are not among the numerous actions that the International Economic Emergency Powers Act authorizes the president to take under a declared emergency. Indeed, the word tariff does not appear in the relevant statute at all. No president has previously relied on the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to impose tariffs in the half century since the enactment of that law. Under our constitutional system, the president may not rule by fiat. The California lawsuit explains exactly what a tariff is, and none of Donald Trump's lawyers will be able to dispute one word of this in court where they're not allowed to lie. A tariff is a tax. The lawsuit says a tariff is a tax placed on goods imported into a country. It is assessed on the good at the port of entry. So the cost is borne by the distributor who is receiving the goods in the United States, not on the country of origin. The tariff effects are thus immediate. And so there it is in writing in federal court. China does not pay Donald Trump's tariffs. Never has, never will, not one penny of them. And Donald Trump's lawyers will not dare to contest that fact in any way in court. China does not pay Donald Trump's tariffs. That lawsuit says exactly what I learned in high school. Quote, the Constitution does not vest in the president any authority to impose tariffs. Rather, the Constitution expressly vests the authority to impose tariffs solely in Congress, not the president. Congress's power in this area is exhaustive because the Constitution does not vest in the president any authority to impose tariffs. Any authority for the president to do so must come, if at all, from an act of Congress. And Congress has indeed granted the president an extremely limited right to impose tariffs, for example, in anti-dumping cases in which, after a full and exhaustive study of trade practices, the federal government determines that an exporter to this country has engaged in unfair trade practices of pricing below actual cost, for example, in an attempt to specifically undermine producers of that good in the United States. In cases like that, which are rare, they have been carefully adjudged by every president who has imposed anti-dumping penalties. That is the principal tool presidents have used to combat unfair trade practices that violate some trade agreements that we already have in place with some countries around the world. And every president prior to Donald Trump has used that power rarely and very carefully. The lawsuit quotes language from the House of Representatives defining the dimensions of an emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Quote, emergencies are by their nature rare and brief and are not to be equated with normal ongoing problems. Normal ongoing problems would be smuggling drugs into this country, smuggling fentanyl into this country, kind of drugs that have been smuggled in this country for all of our lives. Through the entire history of this country, there's been smuggling into this country. And there is another piece of the law that Donald Trump is pretending to use to raise tariffs, which he is very clearly violating. The lawsuit accurately says that the law provides that the president, in every possible instance, shall consult with the Congress before exercising any of the authorities granted by this chapter, and shall consult regularly with the Congress so long as such authorities are exercised. Donald Trump violated each word of that provision. Donald Trump did not consult with Congress before trying to use that law, and has not consulted with Congress after invoking that law, so he's violated that law. How much is at stake for the state of California? California is the biggest manufacturing state in the country, not Michigan, where the auto industry created so many manufacturing jobs. California is our biggest manufacturing state. California is also our biggest agricultural state. Not Iowa, not Nebraska, California, biggest agricultural state in the country. California's economy is bigger than the economy of every foreign country in the world except China, Germany, and Japan. And so no state has bigger stakes in the burdens imposed by Donald Trump's illegal tariffs than California.
No state is poised to lose more than the state of California. So that's our state of mind. And that's why we're asserting ourselves on behalf of 40 million Americans. And I imagine if you caucus those 40 million Americans, you'd find few, I don't care where they were in the last election, that are celebrating this uncertainty, that are celebrating the largest tax increase in modern U.S. history. In essence, a sales tax.
That is the plaintiff, Gavin Newsom, in the lawsuit California filed against Donald Trump today, announcing that lawsuit. And here's the lawyer who filed that case, announcing the lawsuit this morning in the Central Valley of California with the governor, America's biggest agricultural basin, the Attorney General of the state of California, Rob Bonta.
Trump is attempting to override Congress and steamroll the separation of powers. That means he's trampling over his own party, by the way, which currently controls Congress. Again, Congress hasn't given him the authority to impose these sweeping and chaotic tariffs pursuant to emergency powers, which means he can't do it. Bottom line, Trump doesn't have the singular power to radically upend the country's economic landscape.
If you've been wondering all these years why the founders would have given the President of the United States the singular power to radically upend the country's economic landscape, the answer is they didn't. No one did. The Trump tariffs are unconstitutional, so says the Constitution, so says the richest and most economically powerful state in the Union. Leading off our discussion tonight is California's Attorney General Rob Bonta. General Bonta, thank you very much for joining us tonight on this important night, and thank you so much for all of the details that you've incorporated in your complaint that you filed today. I read every word of it, all of the trade history, all of the constitutional history, all of the legal history. What made you finally decide at this point, this is when we have to take this action?
Well, thank you for having me, Lawrence. I'm honored to be here. Governor Newsom and I are bullish on we have inflation that will be rising because of these tariffs that aren't just bad policy that sent our economy into a tailspin, led to the two biggest days of losses on the stock market, and will shrink our economy by some estimations of $100 billion to the tune of $100 billion a year. They're illegal. And that is our North Star. When the Trump administration does something unlawful, we will see him in court. He cannot break the law. He cannot violate the Constitution. He thinks he's above the law. He's not. He thinks he can violate the Constitution. He can't. And we are here in California to take him to court when he does, hold him accountable, and prevent him from doing harmful and unlawful things as he's done here. We're the first to act of any state. We're proud of that. We have a unique place in the world economy, as you mentioned, the 5th largest economy in the world, and we need to protect our people, our families, and our businesses.
You made the announcement in the Central Valley. That's Republican voting territory. Normally, it's a heavily agricultural area. That's the place that's being hit hardest, possibly hardest by these tariffs in California. But they're hitting everything, including Hollywood. China has taken action against entertainment products coming into China. What were you hearing today in the Central Valley with so many Trump supporters in the Central Valley who are now on the verge of or becoming the victims of these tariffs?
Gratefulness for California's action, for standing up and pushing back against this unlawful conduct from the president that is so harmful. I'm hard-pressed to find anyone who is supportive of these tariffs. And we had business owners from the Central Valley of California, Chris and Christine, who powerfully told their stories about the impact this is having on their businesses and their industries. And it's important for people to tell their story, to tell the impact on the small mom and pop that's about to shutter their doors and go out of business, on the iconic anchors of California industries, are ag or tech, Hollywood, and the impacts that it has on them. This is indiscriminate and reckless, impacting everyone. Doesn't matter if you're blue or red, your political affiliation. You are being impacted. You are being damaged. You are being harmed. And while some might want to voice their support, I'm certain there are many quietly cheering from the sidelines about this action that we're taking today as a state of California, because we're preventing with it harm from being visited on Californians going forward if we're able to be successful, as we believe we will in this case, and able to stop the majority of these tariffs.
General Bonta, before you go, I've got to ask you one question about the post-fire California. This is actually my first week back in Los Angeles since the fires. I'm dealing with some struggles at my house, which was very close to the edge of the fire. But I've had so many friends, as you do, I know, so many people who lost their homes in this fire, who are now struggling with an insurance system in California that will not come close to compensating their losses. What can be done about the victims of this fire who thought they were fully insured against it, who believe they are now facing real financial ruin by not being compensated for the total losses they've suffered?
Let me first say my heart goes out to you, Lawrence, all of those impacted in California.
Please, General Bonta, let me stop you there. Your heart needs not pay any attention to me. I had to clean up. Some ash, and nothing compared to people who actually suffered.
Understood. And the governor and I, our leaders here in California are fully committed to helping our fellow Californians heal. We've seen some of the best in California as people have locked arms and gone shoulder to shoulder and lifted others up during this difficult time. We fought back against price gouging and other scams and frauds to protect consumers. And the insurance issue is a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge that needs a resolution. It's all hands on deck. The legislature, the governor, our insurance commissioner, and many others are focused on making sure that people who get their full extent of their insurance. And we have a fair plan that can be part of the solution, but it's certainly not a complete solution. So this is an ongoing challenge as we continue to move into these unprecedented times where we have new normals. Wildfires become more frequent, more devastating. We're seeing such pain and devastation. We need to be able to have a system, including an insurance system that works for everyday Californians and make sure they're made whole when they're harmed. So more to come on that ongoing work. We got our sleeves rolled up and our heads down, but we know the gravity of the issue and the urgency of the need for a solution.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who already had a lot on his plate before deciding to sue Donald Trump. Thank you very much for starting off our conversations here tonight.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, at the Port of Seattle today, Washington Senator Maria Cantwell and others told the truth about Donald Trump's illegal tariffs. That's next.